Is Australia building a wall to keep China out? Not a physical wall, but a wall of military partnerships stretching across Southeast Asia and the Indo-Pacific. If you take a look at some of Australia's defence agreements with countries in this area, it certainly looks like Australia is attempting to stop a potential Chinese invasion before it even gets to our shores. So today, let's take a look at these military partnerships, what countries are involved, what access is Australia and our partners getting, and find out whether this type of barrier could stop an increasingly aggressive China from reaching the land down under. I'm Pikos, and today we're talking tactics. China's expanding reach. China's military footprint in the South China Sea has grown dramatically over the past decade. Looking at the military parades being hosted in Beijing, it's more and more obvious that China is looking to project strength around the world. The Chinese Navy has become the largest in the world by ship count, and its Coast Guard, which is increasingly acting like a paramilitary force, regularly intimidates vessels from the Philippines, Vietnam, Taiwan, and even some of our own. They are gradually claiming more and more of the South China Sea by way of creating artificial islands. They do this by dredging sand onto reefs and then concreting over them to create permanent structures. In response, Vietnam has started doing the same, and together they have destroyed thousands of acres of coral reefs, according to the US government and the Center for Strategic and International Studies. These artificial islands have collectively become known as the Great Wall of Sand, and China is building on these islands. They're building military bases, complete with airstrips, capable of launching nuclear bombers. It's alarming, not only for their close neighbours like the Philippines and Japan, but also the US and Australia. But China's expansion isn't about a sudden invasion. It's a slow, strategic push. By combining economic pressure, political influence, and a constant military presence, Beijing is redrawing the balance of power in the Indo-Pacific one step at a time. For Australia, the fear isn't specifically that China will land troops in Darwin. It's that we wake up one day to find our sphere of influence quietly taken over and the rules of our region rewritten without a single shot being fired. The modern Brisbane Line. During World War II, there were rumours about something called the Brisbane Line. The idea was that if Japan invaded Australia, we would withdraw forces back to Brisbane, effectively abandoning the north of the country and focusing our defences on the southern half. This was never an official strategy for obvious reasons, but it revealed something deeper: a fear of being isolated, cut off from allies, and unable to defend the vast expanse of our country. 80 years later, that same anxiety has returned, but in a different form. And it feels like we have a new Brisbane Line of sorts. Instead of preparing to defend from Brisbane southwards, Australia is now extending its defensive perimeter northwards into Southeast Asia. Through partnerships with countries like Singapore, the Philippines, and Papua New Guinea, we're building a chain of alliances and forward positions that can act as a barrier to China's growing reach. This modern Brisbane Line isn't about retreating, it's about projecting strength and making sure any threat to Australia is dealt with long before it gets close to our shores. Australia's chain of defence agreements. I made a video recently about Australia's military alliances, and while I mentioned that Australia had a number of smaller defence partnerships with a number of countries, I didn't specifically mention them all or go into detail about what they all entail. It was actually Thomas B 5600's comment that compelled me to go into a bit more detail about these agreements and actually make this video. So thank you, Thomas B 5600, and make sure to comment your thoughts below if you have an idea for a future video. Australia has a number of defence partnerships with nations all across the Indo-Pacific. Today, I just want to take a look at a few of them. Singapore. With Singapore, the defence relationship is long-standing and deeply embedded. In the 1970s, they joined the Five Power Defence Arrangements, which started joint training exercises and strategic cooperation. In the 80s and 90s, bilateral cooperation deepened, with Singaporean forces beginning to train in Australia. And in 2016, both countries signed the Comprehensive Strategic Partnership, which expanded collaboration in defence, trade and science. Singapore even invested around $2.25 billion into upgrading the training area at Shoalwater Bay and Townsville. Just this year, the two nations signed a significant memorandum of understanding which builds further on the decades of cooperation and lays out ambitious new paths for joint training, science, and technology, logistics and supply chain work. Under the agreement, Australia will gain enhanced access for the ADF through Singapore, while the Singapore Armed Forces gained increased access to Australia's training areas, including establishing a rotational fighter training detachment at Shoalwater Bay and Greenvale. The agreement also deepens joint research and defence industry cooperation, synchronises supply chains and logistics between Canberra and Singapore, and formalises professional exchanges in domains such as cyber, information warfare, and future warfighting. Singapore sits at the southern tip of the Malay Peninsula, right at the entrance to the Malacca Strait. This is a vital choke point through which an estimated 25 to 30% of global maritime trade passes, including roughly 80% of China's imported crude oil. Control or influence over this narrow passage is strategically critical, making Singapore the tip of the spear in this region. Australia's partnership with Singapore is strategic, forward-looking, and makes Singapore an even more capable partner, one that increases Australia's presence in Southeast Asia, strengthens interoperability, and reinforces collective defence in a region that matters. The Philippines. Australia and the Philippines have had a formal defence partnership since 1995, when we signed a Memorandum of Understanding on Defence Cooperation, which allowed for training, intelligence sharing, and joint exercises. In 2012, it was upgraded to a comprehensive partnership, and then in 2023, the two countries signed a new strategic partnership agreement. This allowed for joint patrols in the South China Sea and more joint exercises, notably Exercise Alon, one of Australia's largest overseas exercises. It sees members of the Australian Defence Force and the Armed Forces of the Philippines train together around the islands of Palawan and Luzon. According to the ADF, Exercise Alon demonstrates the strength of the strategic partnership between Australia and the Philippines, shared value in maintaining a region where state sovereignty is protected, that international law is followed, that nations can make decisions free from coercion. Together, Australia and the Philippines are transforming their partnership from a cooperative friendship into a frontline alliance, standing shoulder to shoulder to protect shared interests and uphold stability in the South China Sea. There's also 8 secret projects. Many people are suggesting that it could be runways and military bases within the Philippines itself, but as we get more intel on them, we'll be sure to include a new video. Indonesia. Australia and Indonesia's defence relationship has evolved through highs and lows. The first agreement in 1995 collapsed after the 1999 East Timor crisis, but was rebuilt with the Lombok Treaty in 2006. This agreement reaffirmed respect for each other's sovereignty and established cooperation on counter-terrorism, maritime patrols, and intelligence sharing. A key clause committed both nations not to support separatist movements. This was seen as a direct response to Australia's handling of West Papuan refugees in 2005 and reflected Indonesia's sensitivity around separatist movements. Since coming into force in 2008, the treaty has laid the foundation for regular military exercises and strategic dialogue. That partnership was elevated again in 2024 with the Australia-Indonesian Defence Cooperation Agreement, the most significant defence pact between the two nations. This enabled deeper collaboration on joint operations, defence technology and disaster relief, and reinforcing a shared commitment to a peaceful, rules-based Indo-Pacific. Japan. Australia and Japan maintain a robust and comprehensive defence partnership rooted in their comprehensive strategic partnership established in 2014. Defence and security cooperation forms a central pillar of this relationship, reflecting shared interests in regional stability, a rules-based Indo-Pacific, and interoperability between their armed forces. The two nations regularly coordinate through annual 2+2 meetings of foreign and defence ministers, ensuring strategic alignment on security policies and regional contingencies. Practical cooperation spans a wide range of domains, including joint exercises and training across land, sea, air, and cyber, as well as peacekeeping, disaster response, and humanitarian assistance. Key exercises such as Talisman Sabre and bilateral maritime operations reinforce interoperability, operational readiness, and shared strategic understanding. Additionally, Australia and Japan collaborate on defence industry initiatives, technology transfer, and material supply chains to strengthen their defence capabilities. In 2022, the Australia-Japan Reciprocal Access Agreement further deepened defence ties by enabling each nation's forces to operate more seamlessly on the other's territory. This partnership positions both countries as key security partners in the Indo-Pacific, enhancing their ability to respond to regional challenges, support multilateral security initiatives, and contribute to a stable, rules-based regional order. The Australia-Japan defence relationship is widely regarded as one of Canberra's most important in the region. Other partnerships. But that's not all. Australia has also negotiated defence partnerships or agreements with a number of countries in the Indo-Pacific, including Malaysia, South Korea, Thailand, Brunei, India, Vietnam, Cambodia, Laos, Vanuatu, Fiji, Papua New Guinea, and the Solomon Islands. A key piece of Australia's defensive puzzle, at least in my mind, is Christmas Island, about 1,550 kilometres off the coast of Western Australia. It's actually an Australian external territory and is small, remote, but perfectly positioned to monitor and protect one of the most important choke points in the world, the Sunda Strait. If you saw my video on a hypothetical World War III scenario a few weeks ago, you know this was a crucial area during a battle between Chinese naval ships and Australia's Navy and Air Force. It's easy to see why Australia might want to establish key military infrastructure there. During the recent Talisman Sabre training exercise, this is exactly what they did. Airlift a HIMARS to Christmas Island for training simulations. Strategic implications. In World War II, Australia looked south for safety, drawing a line across the continent and preparing to defend what it could. But in the 21st century, the strategy has completely flipped. Now Australia looks north for security, building alliances, bases, and partnerships across the Indo-Pacific to push that defensive line further from home. But there are some risks. Increased military cooperation inevitably heightens tensions with China, which sees these moves as encirclement. There's also the danger of stretching Australia's limited defence resources too thin across too many commitments. And in partner nations like the Philippines or Papua New Guinea, there's always the potential for domestic backlash over issues of sovereignty and the presence of foreign troops. But what do you think? Will Australia's military partnerships create a barrier to protect us from potential Chinese attack? Which other countries should Australia be making defence agreements with? Let me know your thoughts in the comments section down below. That's it for today. I'm Pikos, and we've been talking tactics.